I'll say what every guy wants to hear. Size does not matter if you know what you're doing with what you have. And Rueben Bain Jr. knows what he's doing. All right.
Bro.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Jenks Island podcast, the only NFL podcast from your takes from a washed-up Division III cornerback and his friends. I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, joined again by my great friends and co-hosts, Ty and STERB. In today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the edge class for this 2026 NFL draft. We're going to be giving our top 8. There is a little bit of a drop-off after the top 3 to maybe the top 4, and then there's a big group of guys that are all kind of in an equivalent grouping. And so we wanted to break that down for you guys, give you guys that rankings from 4 to 8, give you a little bit of a deeper look into this draft class. But getting right into it, at an honorable mention, we're going to start from the bottom and go to the top. So Sturb, you have an honorable mention that didn't quite crack our consensus top 8, but you are very, very high on. Who do you got?
Well, it's very debatable if he cracked our consensus list or not. A bit of a scam there. Basically, these guys were lower on him. I was higher on him. We took the average. They didn't like it. So we got Joshua Josephs from Tennessee here. He's 6'3", 242 at the combine, 34 and a quarter inch arms. If you look at him play on the field, Jay said he looks like a deer in headlights sometimes, or whatever the wordage he used.
Yes, baby giraffe. Baby giraffe.
Yeah, I do kind of agree with that sometimes, but I think he showed a lot of upside to, show refined hands. He's pretty strong first frame, I would say. Looking at his build, you would think he's like really, really weirdly built, really light, really lanky. And he was used as part of a rotation in college. So like they wanted to get some heavier bodies in on the line. But I think what he showed on the field was actually pretty encouraging. He's definitely not a finished product. I think he's pretty raw. And he's coming into the draft at just about 22 and a half years old. So like slightly on the older end of a prospect. But I think if this guy goes to the right D-line coach and they pack some weight on him, I think he could be, like a decent caliber starting edge in the NFL. But for me, it's just like he's got to get a little more refined. He's got to play the run a little better. And he's got to obviously put on the weight. But I really liked him. These guys, not so much. But I'll let you guys talk smack against him, so to say.
Well, I will say that, like, one of the big positives for him is his lankiness. His arms, his wingspan is absurd. And I think that is a major, major upside when you're looking at a guy like him. That gives you a huge upside when you get to the NFL. When guys are bigger, faster, stronger, you're going to have that reach. And I know that's a big knock on one of the guys at our very top of the list, and we'll get to that when we get there. But I do think his arm length being as big as it is a big plus for him, even though I said he does look like a giraffe, a baby giraffe at times, but I think he could develop in the NFL.
Yeah, I had him at 9. I think the baby giraffe comment probably just comes from sometimes he just has like a lack of a plan when he comes into pass rush. But I thought, when he did have a plan, he had a really good Euro step. The Euro step is kind of one of those moves that you don't see a ton, but when a guy does it really well, it's obviously, a great move for a skinnier guy like this too, to not get hands on. I thought, he did a good job hand fighting. I think it's just a run game, right? Where, he peeks inside a little bit too much instead of holding his gap. And some of that I think is because of the size, right? Where he thinks, let me try to shoot this gap and make this play in the backfield rather than, if I try to hold up a guy on the outside, I'm probably going to get, worked off my spot. So I like the tool bag that he has for pass rushing, but it's just coming in mentally with a plan of what's my rush move going to be against this guy. And I don't know, I'm not in the room with them, but some of that is film, right? That's coming into the game, knowing what are the offensive tackle strengths. And at the next level at the NFL, you're way more prepared for some of those things. So I think that will definitely improve. But to Sturge's point, right, it's just packing on some more weight and being better in the run game.
Moving on to our start of our list at number 8, Ty, who do we got?
Yeah, Cashius Howell. I was a little bit higher on him. I had him at number 6. I think you guys are a little bit lower just because of the arm length. And that's a concern. I think it's the shortest arms or the third shortest arms since 1999 amongst any edge rushers. So definitely, some concern there because at the next level, right, guys are going to be, bigger, stronger, longer. They're going to be able to get hands on him. He did play in the SEC, had a ton of production. And I think his biggest strength is his ability to stay. It sounds weird, but the ability to stay away from the tackles, right? He's so creative in finding ways to get guys to not get hands on him. His best move is his ghost rush, right? His ghost rush is absurd. He's got great bend. The ghost rush almost reminds me of the way that Von Miller uses that rush, where it's such the low bend. You kind of give that high look and you get that low bend, and guys can't get hands on you. But he does a great job with his twitchiness and his lateral quickness to kind of, read the tackle, see what the tackle's trying to give him, and then quickly attack that and come in. I think he's a guy that comes in with plans, because you can see how quickly he sees what the tackle's going to do, and then he attacks that. I think he's got a little bit of power, and I think most of the power is generated from that speed rush. He's got a really quick get off, and I think, his quick get off, he transitions really well into the speed, but it's the run game where he needs to improve, right? I think he's got to get a little bit of a stronger base, and then the short arms are going to help him. If he can improve the base, I think that, we see a guy like Rueben Bain, who we'll talk about a little bit later. You can do it with the short arms if you're a strong guy. I think that, this guy immediately comes in as third down, like third and long type of edge rusher. He'll come in and contribute as a pass rusher. He's just got room to grow as a run stopper. But if you draft a guy at the end of the first round, I think that's probably his range, is the end of the first, early second. And he can just be a situational pass rusher for you at a very, very high level with, the like I said, the twitchiness, the lateral quickness, the move set that he has. I think that's a home run hit for you. So I had him at 6, but I know we have him at 8.
STERB, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I will say, as a consensus, we are pretty low on him. Like Ty said, like, this guy is, frequently getting mocked like back in the first round, and we have him here at 8. I had him at 10 just because, like, when I'm looking at guys who win in a specific way or are built kind of uniquely, and in this case, it's uniquely in a poor way with his, abnormally short arms. I'm looking at, like, how specifically are you winning, and is that translatable to the NFL? With Cashius Howell, what Ty mentioned is that, guys aren't able to get hands on him, but, like, at the NFL level, guys' arm length are just going to be a little bit longer, right? So, like, how does that look like at the NFL level when he's, his move set can be taken away by the extra length at the next level. So I'm a little concerned about his translatability. We'll talk about it with Bain later, but I think Bain wins in ways, that show that his arm length isn't really a problem. Whereas Cashius Howell is just completely taking it out of the equation, but tackles are good enough at the next level and they're long enough that they're going to be able to get a little bit more hands on you. And when that looks like what it does for Cashius Howell, he's light, he's, sawed off, so to say, in a limited time on the field, I think it's going to be, I think he's just going to be less effective. So I didn't see him as definitely not a back end of the first round guy. I think I had him as an early third. Yeah, early third is where I grade him. But yeah, kind of the same downsides that Ty mentioned there.
Yeah, STERB was the lowest out of the three of us. I had him at number 8. And I think the big thing for me is, as good of a pass rusher he is, I think his run game bumps him down. His ability in the run game really does bump him down the list in comparison to some of these other guys. I think the other guys are a little bit better in the run game and equivalent, if not a little bit lesser in the pass game. Some of these guys are higher than him on my list and our list as well. But my thing for him is in the pass game with his short arms, right, in the NFL. I want to see him really, be precise with his hands. At times in college, I see his hands a little bit all over the place, but I want to see him, just refine that, especially with the short arms. If he can do that and become perfect with his hands, these short arms aren't going to limit him in the pass game. Even if guys do have that longer wingspan, if he's able to, swim, rip through, things like that, just get his hands into, he's not going to be able to get him in the chest without the tackles really getting a hold of him, but use his hands to defend against the tackle's arms. I think that will really, really help him a lot in the NFL.
Let me say this. I don't actually think that, if a guy, you can get your hands into a guy with shorter arms and still win, right? If you have great hand fighting.
He doesn't do that.
But I'm saying, at the next level, right? It's
Yeah.
not
He's not strong enough to do that. Whereas a
hand
player
fighting
like Bain
has nothing to do with upper body strength. It's all about placement, like Jenks said, right? If I get you in the wrist or if I get you in the elbow, I can immediately control you. It's not like I have to grab you and rip you down, right? It's all about hand fighting and placement of the hands, like to Jenks's point. So if he can perfect
I
the
thought you were
hand
talking about landing
placement,
a punch in the chest.
that's a whole different thing. No. I'm saying if he does punch in the chest, right, and the guy latches onto him, you can still win with hand fighting. He's not going to win with a push-pull, of course. But I'm saying, to Jenks's point, if he can refine that, you can win at the next level easily.
Yeah, I just want to also, that run game, like you said, Ty, and I do think we're all kind of in agreement that he is a third down guy when he gets into the league, and maybe he does improve and develop his ability in the run game. But at this point, I just don't see him being able to do that right away. Moving on to number 7 on our list, Sturb, who do we got?
We got R. Mason Thomas here. So a bit of a shocker having R. Mason Thomas over Cashius Howell compared to consensus. Both of these guys, I think, are going to be, probably purely DPR types. R. Mason Thomas came in at just over 6'2", 241. Really, really small hands on him, sub 9-inch hands, and then sub 32-inch arms. So, like, kind of in a similar boat to Cashius Howell in terms of, not having quote unquote NFL size. But R. Mason Thomas just strikes me initially. As soon as you turn on the tape, you're like, damn, this guy is ferocious as hell. Like you just want him on your team so badly. And then the get off is crazy with him as well. He plays with great burst. He is very, very little when you turn on the tape. And I think he shows flashes in the run game. And he played on more rundowns, or he played on more just all-around snaps than I would have expected, just looking at his measurements. And he shows some people think he's a pretty decent run defender in this class. I didn't really see that very much. I thought it was a very, very boom or bust type of run defender, and a lot more bust there than boom. But like I said, the frame and the size are like the biggest knocks on him. I think he's a DPR at best. I would probably take him, mid round 2, maybe late round 2. But this is the type of guy that you just want on your football team. He plays so hard.
Yeah, my big things for R. Mason Thomas that bumped him down is that I see very often on film that tackles are able to get their arms on him and he can't get them off. He just as soon as they're on, he just has to kind of push through his way through the edge and hope that the quarterback either is too far back in the pocket or the running back kind of runs into him. And I think that does happen at times, but I think for me, he's undersized and he's not going to be able to bull rush in the NFL. I don't see that as an ability for him. Maybe he'll be able to win some reps that way, but he's going to have to utilize his speed and his quickness, which isn't at the highest level in comparison to some of these other guys. So he's relying on his athleticism, which he can do at times. And that's, he is a solid pass rusher and he is very vicious and ferocious, like you said, Sturb, but I just don't see him necessarily. All in all, I think for me,
the bag is going to be removed at the NFL level.
Yes. And for me, I think the biggest thing that had him above Howell in my eyes was that he is an extremely high motor player. And I think he's going to be better in the run than Howell, but it's just by maybe that much in my eyes. It's not a huge jump between the guys. Ty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I had him at 8. I think the size for me, because of the way that he plays, is more of a knock. He is he has such a good get off and he flies off the ball, but he likes to combine that with speed to power a lot. And the speed to power, like we mentioned with Howell, something like that won't work. Now he does a good job hand fighting, but he's never going to get to that because of the way that he just gets off the ball and tries to get up into guys. You saw it against Caden Proctor. Caden Proctor dominated him 9 times out of 10 in that college football playoff game because of the way that R. Mason Thomas played, and he didn't adjust against a bigger guy. So I think that, like you mentioned, the athleticism's there. I think he's a pretty good hand fighter, but he needs to let the hand fighting be what helps him win against bigger guys, not what he does against, smaller tackles that he can take advantage of getting up inside. So, he does a good job of it. It's just adjusting that. And it's, again, coming in with a plan, right? These guys, I think a lot of times they go with what they're good at. They don't necessarily come in with a plan against these tackles that's different against, one tackle versus the next, right? And against Caden Proctor, you need to play a little bit more, kind of off and use your speed to beat him around the edge. Use your hands to beat him because he's a slower guy, right? And he just didn't do that. So I think that was a bit of my knock on him, was just seeing that film against Caden Proctor.
Yeah, and we did have Proctor a little bit lower on our board than some people have him. So that's, take that as you will. If you're struggling against Caden Proctor, who we don't think necessarily right away is going to go in to the NFL and be a starter necessarily, or even be like a high end guy, you could take that as you will. And obviously he did have some success because he's on our board. But when you're struggling against Caden Proctor with those sorts of things, it's a little bit of a knock on your game, and that is a big result of why he's a little bit lower on our list. Moving on to number 6, I have Akheem. We have Akheem Mesidor. I was a little bit higher on Akheem than the rest of the guys. That's why I'm breaking him down. But I really do think his age that's being talked about, he's a little bit older than the rest of the guys in this class, is something that's really very overrated. Yeah, a little bit. It's being talked about here and there. I think it's very, very overrated. And let me tell you why. When you're an edge and you get the paydays that you do once you have that extension, we're seeing guys getting extensions at 31. I mean, obviously Trey Hendrickson just got paid by the Ravens, and he's up there in age. That's going to be Akheem Mesidor age-wise. After his extension, he'll be, 29, maybe 30 if he gets that fifth-year option added on. But a guy like Akheem Mesidor, I think, will be able to have similar production to what he did in college in the NFL, at least in the pass rush game. He was a top 10 pass rusher as far as win rate goes in the pass rush game. Really, really good bend at times in his pass rush. I love how he uses his hands, good hand usage. Great first step in the pass rush as well. And he has a polished pass rush arsenal. He can do a little bit of everything. He can beat you inside when you're setting up outside and vice versa on the line. And I think the biggest con for him when we talk about Mesidor is his ability in the run game. A lot of missed tackles in the run game, and I think that's a huge knock. Hammer's a big person on. He needs a D-line that can make tackles. If you're missing tackles behind the line, Hammer will not draft you. I know that's going to probably knock Mesidor down Hammer's board, but in my eyes, he will be able to improve that in the NFL. And I think as long as he's disrupting plays like he was in college, big guy on getting into the backfield and disrupting plays in the backfield where it happens. He did that in the run and the pass game. And I think once you can do that in the NFL, guys are too fast to be able to really allow running back. He breaks the first tackle 2 yards deep in the backfield. Most of the times, he's not getting another 3 yards down the field. He's going to get tackled by the next guy close to that range. And Ty's shaking his head a little bit. Yeah, we'll see some running backs, especially faster running backs nowadays. But I think that it will be limited enough in the NFL that's not the biggest knock. And then the other obvious con is that he is older than these guys. He's not going to necessarily develop maybe as much as some of these other guys that are 22 and younger in this draft class. But I think Akheem Mesidor is going to be a really solid player for a really long time. I'll go to Ty. Ty, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I had him at 7. I think he's a solid player. I think his hand fighting is so refined, being under Jason Taylor, obviously also being an older player, he's been, working within the system for a while and just kind of refining that. You talked about the inside, the outside, right? He's got a great double swipe, working on the outside, and a great club swim, kind of working on the inside. He loves the club swim if he can get an inside move, especially because they used him a little bit in like a 4-eye, on the same side of the ball as Rueben Bain. So he has that kind of two-way go where he can take the inside. But I think the run game is the biggest knock, right? And, you can go back and clip me on the defensive tackles. I don't think it's as big of a deal, right? Because I think that's a disruptor position. On the edge, because of where it is on the football field, right? You cannot let up the edge. You have to maintain the edge. I think tackling is a little bit more important there. And that's not something that I typically see improving in the NFL, right? Tackling, if you're bad at tackling in college, you're probably going to be bad at it in the NFL because it probably means you were bad in high school and you're probably bad tackler as a kid, right? It's just you never refined those skills at the youth level, and that's carried over into, where you are now. And he's 25 years old, right? I mean, I don't know how much more improving there is there. The other two things for me, I didn't think he had the best lateral quickness. I think when it came to, planting and making moves on quarterbacks or running backs that, especially against quarterbacks, right? When the play shakes out and a quarterback kind of redirects, I don't think he redirects as well. And you see it versus Bain. And that's where I think it really comes out. He does a way worse job than Bain on that. and the power, right? That, some of the scouts, they talk about he has the ability to have power and yada. I didn't really think it showed up that much on film. You kind of watch against Florida, some of the guards there were able to like work him a little bit, and he's trying to hand fight, and it kind of looks like he's trying to work power on them too, but it's just not, he's not getting anywhere. So I think, his hand fighting's awesome. The power can probably come with adding a little bit more strength, but the lateral quickness is not really going to change. And the run game piece, just like missing tackles, I don't really think that's going to change either. But I think, if you took this guy at the top of the second round, you'd be in a great spot having, just a rotational rusher that's really refined.
STERB, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's like a super polished, kind of out of the box player. If he goes to a contender in the second round, I think, you're immediately getting an impact player and you feel pretty good about it. If you're a team that, may take a few years to get there in terms of competing, I don't know if I would touch this guy. I thought it was very funny that the Saints fan is defending the 25-year-old prospect there. I just found that very funny.
Got to do it
but
sometimes.
For him, like you guys said, it's just run game, age, and then Ty was kind of hitting on the only other point I had there was the lack of high-end athleticism, and you see that in the lateral quickness and the strength aspect of the game. But yeah, I'd feel all right if I took this guy in the second round. I wouldn't be cheering or celebrating about it. I think he's like a fine player, and he's, like I said, he's very out of the box. What you see is what you get.
I think that's fair, and I was the highest on him by a decent amount in our list here, so that's a little bit why he's a little bit higher on this board. But I think he'll be a solid edge in the NFL. And I will say this: we kind of have had the discussion. You hear our obviously the draft projections. We had the discussion before we started recording of this class and where we kind of see some of these guys being taken. I mean, Akheem was one of those guys that's being mocked all the way up in top 15, up to 15 in the draft, and I don't think he's necessarily a top 15 draft pick value in this draft. I think I would put him anywhere from 20 to 32. I think that's kind of like the fair range. And I think you'd be happy with that. But being an edge significantly bumps up your draft value. And it's pretty crazy to see it. At least, I mean, people are debating if Caleb Downs is a top 10 pick, and his talent level compared to Akheem Mesidor is just, it's insane.
Not even close.
It's pretty crazy, and we'll talk about that when we get into our mock draft, the best player available versus actual positional value. We'll get into that, but before starting that conversation, let's move on here. Ty, Zion, number 6 or number 5, who do we got?
Number 5, Zion Young. Way to spoil it, man.
Didn't mean to do that. My bad.
Yeah, Zion Young, I feel like he kind of was under the radar for me coming into this draft process, and I'm starting to study him a little bit. The pure power really just shows off on tape. I think in the run game, he's awesome in the run game. And that's, kind of a fundamental piece that I want for, most of my higher end linebackers that I'm going to take in probably the top 15 to 20 in the NFL draft. You got to be good in the run game. I got to be able to play you on all 3 downs. And he does that. He brings a ton of power. That translates into the pass game as well, right? He brings a ton of power in there. He kind of just bullies tackles a lot. I think his get off needs to improve a little bit. Sometimes it's just a little slow. And I think, watching some of these guys, I think the get off is very, and I mean, this is just common sense, but it translates a ton to their stance, right? The stance that he has versus some of the stand-up guys. You see TJ Parker kind of has a similar stance and has a similar slower get off at times. It's just harder to kind of get that burst from almost that like 4-point stance that he takes. But I think this is a guy that could probably play a little bit of 3-tech. Reminds me a little bit of Michael Williams, who I was pretty high on last year as well. I think just like any guy that can bring power and play really well in the run game at that size, at 6'6", is an attractive talent to me. But I think, the get off needs to improve a little bit. I think sometimes he works a little bit too far upfield. I think that, but that's a very coachable thing, right? It's just, again, kind of coming in with more of a plan, right? When he knows that he's not going to be able to beat a guy with power, adding to your pass rush tool bag and just knowing, where, depth of quarterbacks and kind of those things, that can improve. But I think the real strength of his is just in the run game and, as a power pass rusher.
Sir, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I want to actually ask Ty something real quick. So with Michael Williams last year, and like we'll talk about another guy who's similar later, but like with these elite run defenders who like don't show much in the pass game, what specifically are you looking for that can, translate to NFL level pass rushing?
I think it's the power. And I think if you have the power to dominate in the SEC, right, both at Mizzou and at Georgia against guys that are, in theory, right, more NFL ready tackles in the SEC, right, it's some of the top tier talent. And if you have the pure power, I think that you can't teach that, right? It's an unteachable thing. You can teach some of the pass rush moves, but you can't teach that pure strength. And I just think that the run game is so important because that's the majority of the downs that you're going to be playing in the NFL as well. So, like, if I have to pull you off the football field, you know what you're getting, right? It's the same thing with the tight ends that we just talked about last week, right? I never want to have to pull you off the football field. So if I can trust you to just be a power guy in the pass rush, I don't need a ton out of you, right? But just bulldoze the guy in front of you. I think that gives me a little bit more, I had him at 4 in my list. So he's not, cracking that top 3. And I think he's probably, like in the 15 to 20 range still. But yeah, I think, it's just an unteachable trait that you have, and I can teach you the rest.
Okay. Yeah, understood. Yeah, so I really like this guy. Another guy that, you kind of just feel you want on your team. I believe you won Senior Bowl MVP. And the number one thing that comes to my mind when like we're calling his tape is just like the pure violence, like Ty mentioned with the power. You really can't teach the level of power that this guy has. For me, it's just like, how high would you take him comes down to how much you think you can develop him as a pass rusher. So like if like what Ty said, if you're literally just looking for that NFL level power and you like teach him the rest, then yeah, I'd be fine taking this guy like 15 to 20. But just like if he gets like a standard development curve in the NFL, just as he is right now, I'd probably be more comfortable with him in this draft class, like probably late first, early second. But yeah, I really like this guy. Probably one of the best run defenders in this class.
Yeah, I had him at 6 on my list, and I was just a little bit lower on him. I even said this in the group chat. I probably have a little bit of a predisposition towards him because I had to watch Marcus Davenport play for the Saints, and it was, big size and strength, stopping the run off the edge, things like that.
We're
I had
still
to watch
healing
that.
from these guys.
Yeah, still healing a little bit there.
Healing.
So maybe like he should be higher on my list because he is an incredible run defender. He's one of the best at setting the edge in this class. And really the other thing that bumped him down my list is that there wasn't much production from him until this season. He wasn't like a massive producer for multiple years, and it's kind of a more new thing. But I do think that he has the potential to be a guy that can stay on the field for all 3 downs, 4 if you're getting a 4th down. But I think he is a guy that can have an impact and you can keep on the field at all times. And I think, Ty, you made a great point by you can keep him on the field. You don't have to pull him or only put him out there for 3rd downs, which is an issue that some of these other guys have that we've talked about. And I think that is big for NFL teams. So I do think that he could be higher up on boards than I have him for sure. Moving on to our number 4 guy, we have Keldrick Falk, a guy that another strong run defender, ridiculously strong in the line. I think he can anchor the line both inside and out. I think he can be, a 3 tech and still have success, can be on the edge, have success as well in the run game. He doesn't miss tackles. I think I don't remember the exact number. But he was a really low missed tackle rate, has a good motor and effort to chase down plays. I want to say it was against Baylor. There's a screenplay. The receiver breaks free. Probably would have gained another 20 yards, but Falk chases him down 20 to 30 yards down the field. I think that's an incredible testament to who he is as a player. And there's a couple other guys on this list that also have plays like that. But when you're his size, 6'6", 276 at the combine with 34-inch arms, I think that really is a testament to him and his ability. Only 2 sacks, not the biggest producer in this group by any means. But I do think he has the ability to be the best run defender out of this class possibly. And I think if he improves his agility in the pass rush game, he could really also be a solid pass rusher. So anyways, Sturb, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, this is actually the guy when Ty brought up Michael Williams earlier that I thought reminded me more of Michael Williams. Like you just said, he's an elite level run defender, sets the edge really well. But in the pass game, he kind of just gets stifled a little bit. It seems like I don't know how their D-line coaching is at Auburn, but he seems very, very unrefined, like super raw, especially in the pass game. To times where it feels like he's just out of place, not giving up in the middle of plays, but like it doesn't feel like he's doing what he's supposed to do. The burst off the line really isn't that good, and considering that he's supposed to be this elite level athlete, I'd like to see that a little more. I do feel like there's completely untapped potential with this guy, but it feels like a pretty big question mark if you're going to draft him pretty early. I know that going into this season, going into this college football season, he was regarded as a really high prospect. I'm not sure really what to do with that now. I really wrestled with where to put him in my list. I want to say he ended up at number 4 for me overall, but I mean, if I knew that he was getting refined to his, full potential as a player, like he'd probably be at 2 for me. But if on the other side of that curve, then if he's not getting refined, he'd probably be, I don't know, like 8 for me. He's just a mystery box type of player is what I saw.
Yeah. And I will say this real quick. He is turning 20. He's only turning 22 right before the season starts. So he is like,
so I'm giving him a bit of leeway.
Yeah, like in comparison to like Akheem Mesidor, who we talk about like not being able to develop because of his age, like he has the opposite ability. So Ty, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I see the Michael Williams stuff there. I think the difference between, I had Falk at 5 right behind Zion Young. I think the difference is the consistency in the pass rush game. You know what you're getting with Zion Young. You knew what you were getting with Michael was going to be power. Keldrick, he's got the ideal frame. He had 7 sacks in 2024, but then when it comes into 2025, he only has 2 sacks, right? Like you mentioned, him and TJ Parker were talked about as top 3 picks coming into this draft, over the summer, and both of them severely underperformed. Yeah. And, we talked about it with the tight ends, right? Guys that had a little bit worse of a year with injuries and Claire. Changing situations, it's so different. He had the same coaching staff. He was at the same school. Granted, the coaching staff got fired, but I don't understand how you go from 7 sacks to 2 sacks. And you see it on tape. It's the lack of that consistency in the pass rush game. It's sloppy at times, lacks a plan. I think he just wasn't doing the same things that he was doing in 2024, but he just wasn't being coached up enough to be, improving from that as well. But in the run game, it's like he does everything perfect, right? Because he's such a freak. He can play the 3 tech. He creates great separation, holds ground well, tracks everything down from the backside. When he's got pullers coming at him, he dents really well, lets him no ground. He's a perfect prospect when it comes to the run game. And that's why I still had him at 5, seeing it was tough between him and Zion, but I think Zion, more production in the passing game, put him above, or this past year at least, put him above Keldrick for me because of that. He has all the potential in the world to develop as he could be the best pass rusher in this class, 100%, hands down, because of all of this tool bag, how young he is, and the fact that the run game, you don't even need to worry about, right? He's great at it. You just have to develop and not even develop, get him back to doing the things that he did so well 2 years ago, and he'll be an awesome, awesome prospect. So he's probably going to go from 15 to 25, and he's going to end up on a really good team, and he's going to end up coached well, and he's probably going to become like a Pro Bowl level player because of that. If he were in the top 10, he probably wouldn't reach his potential because he'd go to a worse team. There'd be higher expectations. And realistically, right, it's worse coaching because they're in the top 10. So I think he's got all the potential in the world. It was just tough for me because the lack of consistency as a pass rusher this past season it was horrendous, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair for him. And that's the biggest knock I had to, like, just the pass rush game needs to improve. But I think he'll be able to do it. Anyways, moving on, Ty, you're next on our list here. Number 3, who do we got?
Yeah, we got Arvell Reese. I was a little bit higher on him. I had him at number 2. I think he's an absolute chess piece. You can see him. He's kind of like the Micah Parsons a little bit, where they line him up in a 0. They line him up at a 3. They line him up at a 5. It's all stand up, right? It's no hand in the ground or anything like that because he was playing majority as an off-ball linebacker. So he's got a lot of refinement and improvement to do. But I think I had him at 2 just because of the pure athleticism and the talent is through the roof, and everything that he does is very form, right? It's like, that they're coached up very, very well at Ohio State. I think it's just developing the pass rush bag. But in the run game, he's awesome, right? He surfs down the line and really, really well, always making plays from the backside. I think sometimes he does play a little bit too high, and I think it's because he's such a long guy, athletic guy, used to being back as a linebacker. So that's part of just like getting him used to playing up on the line of scrimmage more. You see that a little bit when like he's denting guys too, the pullers, right? He gets worked back a little bit more than some of these other guys because the frame's a little bit smaller. But I just think he's less used to having to play up front like that. And there's something to say, right, for that, right? Maybe he doesn't pan out because he's been playing off-ball linebacker for most of his career, except for until like this past season. And even then, it was a decent split of off-ball and edge, and playing him as zero, playing him as like a blitzing corner sometimes. I mean, they used him pretty much everywhere. But I think, the technique is sound when he does things, and I think he's a freak athlete. It's kind of hard to pass up on a guy like that in the top 5 where, okay, if I have a good D-line coach, I can teach him a few different moves and just get him more used to playing up front. And this guy becomes an all-pro level edge rusher. He could become Isaiah Simmons, where you try to use him everywhere and he doesn't develop. But I think if they just leave him at edge rusher and maybe move him around like they use Micah at like a 0, a 3, a 5, I think you're fine then. But leave him up front, develop him as an edge rusher. He's already great in the run game, and I think he's going to be an all-pro level player.
Sturb, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really liked him. I think he's very, very landing spot dependent. Like if he goes to a coaching staff that doesn't know how to use him, or takes him kind of out of vein, I'll be a little upset, because I do want to see this type really reach its highest potential. We saw like Micah convert to like pretty much a full-time edge role. He still drops into coverage, at a decent rate, more than like an average edge. But this guy is just like a pure athlete, pure front 7 weapon. Ran a 1.58 10-yard split, and then the 4.46 on the 40-yard dash. Kind of got overshadowed by Sonny Styles, his teammate. But this guy is just an absolute freak athlete. And when he's crashing into the line of scrimmage, you wouldn't believe that he's 241. When he crashes into the line of scrimmage, you're like, that is way more force than 241 coming at you.
He's the power guy in this draft just because of the
insane. It is absolutely insane. And that going to the right defense, out of vein, it doesn't even have to be to the Saints, but I want him to kind of fall so that, we can see this type succeed. Rather than like a watered down Micah Parsons, I think he's like a more souped up version of like a Jalen Walker, where, you kind of want this guy walking around your front 7, like a lion hunting his prey, like picking his spots. And, imagine this guy with like a creative defensive coordinator. Like they're going to be able to do, what's that?
Rob Saleh, number 4. Tennessee
Very true.
Titans.
That is a good point. Yeah. Okay. I would love to see that. Let's see him go there then. But if he doesn't go at 3, what is it? Then I would hope he falls to like a good defensive coordinator. But yeah, I really like this guy. Probably had him like mid first in like a standard class, which is good enough for top 10 in this easily. So.
Yeah. I don't really have too much to add on that. I do think that 3 would be fine with that. And honestly,
no, 3 is Arizona. That's worst case scenario for him.
3 would be bad. 2,
4. Okay, gotcha.
2 and 4. 2 and 4, I think, would both be fine. And I say 2 now because I do think that him having a guy like Demario Davis being able to, even though he's not a lineman, he can coach Reese up so much in all aspects of the game. He can tell anyone what to do on any side, any position on the defense, and help them. And that's something that really is an advantage for them. If you go to the Cardinals, it's pretty rough outlook right now. And then the Titans, obviously, their defense has completely evolved this offseason, and they've really turned around. They have playmakers everywhere to go around him. So the focus isn't going to be purely on him. And then maybe if he falls to 8, the Saints take him and you put him across from his Ohio State counterpart in Chase Young. That would be a fun pairing as well. And then just to say, like, you do take him top 5. Say you take him top 5. He doesn't pan out as necessarily as a pass rusher. He still would be a really solid linebacker for you. It's not going to be like a total. I don't think it would be an Isaiah Simmons situation where he kind of wasn't a very good linebacker either in the NFL. I think Arvell Reese would pan out as a linebacker and have that opportunity. And I know we'll save that for the linebackers episode, but just to say, like, his draft value definitely isn't necessarily at risk of being a major bust, because I do think he'll be solid at either spot.
Also, I think Isaiah Simmons was like kind of, this is going to sound stupid, but like Isaiah Simmons was a little before his time, so to say, where like he was the first of these kind of prospects to come out.
Yeah.
And NFL didn't really know what to do with him yet. So
you know where he ended up? He ended up in Arizona.
Just a wasteland of.
All right, let's keep Reese out of Arizona, please.
Yeah.
Yes. Give him a tackle. Give him a tackle that, you know, they can deal with that. Yeah, that's the most likely pick. But I will say this too. He can't even drink liquor yet. He's not 21. He won't turn 21 until August, I want to say. So the guy's young. He can develop at anywhere he goes. And I think that is extremely attractive for teams out there. Moving on to number 2 on our list, we're going to have David Bailey, a guy that is being mocked very commonly to number 2 to the Jets here. He is probably the viewed as the number 1 edge purely in this class by the consensus out there. And I think that's mainly due to, you know, number 1's arm length, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. But David Bailey, I'm going to say this before I say anything else about him. I don't know why. It's a gut feeling. I could see him potentially just going out and being a bust. He could be like a bust player in the top 5 pick. And I have no clue why. It's purely gut feeling. And I said this before we started recording. It could be purely aura based, which unfair. Like, it's completely unfair. But the guy has absolutely zero aura, and maybe that is what scares me. But yeah, I think he has a great ability to utilize both his speed, length, or all of his speed, length, and power all at the same time. And I think that's extremely fun to watch off the edge. He's extremely productive and didn't seem to drop off in big games. He's good in both the run and pass game. Really good bend for his size at 6'4", 251. He's able to bend around the edge and get into the backfield. I'm not a fan of his spin move. I'll be honest. I see a lot of people talk about his spin move, and I think he turns complete. I think his hips get high. His hips go straight up. His shoulders are too high. He stands. Yeah, I think if he tries to do that against a really high level tackle in the NFL, he gets put on his ass. And I will say that because I get annoyed watching that. And Ty, I'll ask you how you kind of feel about that, because you are the most experienced when evaluating edges, especially and D linemen out of the 3 of us. But I'm not the biggest fan of that. And then I think he's a guy that can get washed at times in the run game if a bigger defensive or offensive lineman gets a hold of him. And then I think when O-linemen get on him, I think he struggles with getting their arms off and at times. And I want to see him improve that. If he can do that, this guy can really be a star in the NFL. Ty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the spin move, right? I think the way he sets it up is phenomenal. I think he does a really good job of selling outside and getting guys to bite outside and spinning in. The problem is he gains no ground with it. And if you gain no ground, tackles have the ability right there. You know, you're not selling him so hard outside that they're opening up their hips and expecting you to, you know, run up the field, right? You're selling it a little bit to where you get them to bite and then you spin inside, right? He doesn't gain any ground. The one thing he does decently well on his spin moves that I saw a couple times, he kind of like has his arm out and it like pins them back. And I don't know if that's actually intentional or if that's just kind of flailing as he's spinning, right? Because a guy that we talked about earlier, Joshua Joseph, the Tennessee guy, I thought he did a great job spinning, right? Where he gained ground when he did his spin move. I don't think David Bailey does a great job of that. You know, at the next level, when tackles are not as bad as honestly, he played in the Big 12, right? So the tackles that he was playing against, not phenomenal. Utah had the best tackles. Some of the other guys, pretty damn bad. So I think, you know, it's a move that he should probably try to stay away from unless he starts to refine that. And the spin move is such a risky move for so many reasons, right? But you're turning your back to the lineman if you don't sell it well, if you don't gain ground. And the gaining ground is so important. But I think he's got some good moves when it comes to, you know, beating guys with speed. He transitions really well from the speed to power game, right? He brings a ton of power in that sense. I don't think he brings it in the run game. I think to your point, Jenks, he does get worked off the line a little bit. He's got a good double swipe. I think his double swipe is solid. But I think with the double swipe, Jenks, I know you said he had decent bend. I think he lacks a little bit of the bend in comparison to some of these other guys. I think he could bend a little bit more. And I don't quite understand why, because he's an athletic guy. I know he's a little bit longer and bigger, but I think he thinks that I'm just going to run by guys all the time. And you see that when he quite literally does. He, runs right by offensive linemen. They don't get a hand on him. You also see it where an offensive lineman knows what David Bailey wants to do, and they work him down, and he works himself so far upfield that he's just out of the play. So it's very inconsistent with him, and that's why I have Reese above him, because I think Reese is more of a form player. He understands all the angles of the game, understands the techniques. It's just teaching him a little bit of the pass rush moves. With David Bailey, I think it's getting him to slow down a little bit, slowing down in terms of just not working outfield, slowing down in terms of like my pass rush moves, like, is this actually going to work? Is my spin move going to be effective? And then in the run game, it's just, I think he's got to gain a little bit of weight because he does get worked off his line a little bit. So I think he's a good player. And I think that with good coaching, he'll have a ton of success. I've seen him go to be mocked to the Jets a few times. I think he would be awesome there. Will McDonald is a similar kind of, a speed rusher that, maybe he can learn some stuff from him. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of growing left to do with David Bailey, especially with not having played against some of the best talent starting in the Pac-12 and then in the Big 12.
STERB, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of ragging on him, but we all had him at like a 3 or better. I mean, it feels necessary though, because there is like a loud minority that has him, as like a comfortably top 3 player. I don't know if I'm there with him. Kind of like what Ty said, I don't see that elite bend. A lot of people talk about it, and then you watch the rep and it's like, okay, elite bend. And then you watch it again, and you're like, hold on, wait a second. I didn't see elite bend there. And then you watch it again, and you're just like, oh, it's not actually there. And like we talked about with the spin move, I saw him try to Euro step a couple times. He really doesn't cover that much lateral ground. And like what Ty said, he's actually a pretty good athlete. So you would think that, these moves are succeeding in ways that other edge rushers utilize them with, right? But I don't know what it is about him. It's just the ways that he wins. He employs the same moves as all these other guys, right? We've seen them before, but they seem to win in just like slightly off ways where, it's his hand fighting is very good, whether it's, that slight edge against the tackle and hand fighting, whether it's that slight edge to the outside. But some of this just makes me raise an eyebrow because it doesn't look like it's going to translate to an NFL level. And he doesn't have, I really don't think he has like one specific elite trait. And if I'm taking a guy in the top 10, I would kind of like him to have that. And then what you guys talked about in the run game, I've seen so many mixed reviews about him in the run game. Some people think he's an elite level run defender. Some people think he's the worst run defender in the world. I'm kind of right where you guys are. I think he's slightly below average in the run game. I don't think he's a total liability, but this guy, like Ty said, he's definitely an unfinished product. I'm not ready to like stamp and seal him in the top 5 or anything, but I do think he's a good player.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think Reese and Bailey are the 2 that are getting mocked to go first the most, right? Probably to the Jets. Those are the 2 guys, and it's out of discussion that the number 1 guy on our list isn't going to go there. And we just listed a lot of things that David Bailey could improve or doesn't have refined. Arvell Reese needs developed at certain things. Whereas our number 1 guy, STERB, what are your thoughts on him and why do we have him at number 1?
Yeah, so we all had, or actually I had Rueben Bain number 1. You guys had Josh Josephs? No, I'm kidding. But we all had Rueben Bain at number 1. Measured in just over 6'2", 263 at the combine. And the big knocker is the sub 31-inch arms. There have been some reports that arm length measurement has not been consistent between combine, Super Bowl teams, what have you. I've seen a lot that's come out over the past couple of weeks that some teams have them over 32-inch arms. So I don't know. Arm length feels like it should be a pretty standard thing there. I don't know how arm length can vary by 1.5 inches based on who's taking the measurement.
They're really jamming it into the armpit or something. They're really, or
maybe from like the back of the shoulder or front of the shoulder. I don't know how it's measured.
Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently it's a new guy. The guy who had been doing it for like the past 20 years retired.
Oh my
So
God, what are we doing?
yeah, I don't know. These are just things that I'm hearing. So maybe we take the arms with a grain of salt, but if it gets him to drop to the Saints, I'm not going to complain at all. This guy is. If we just said that he had 32.5-inch arms, so like 32 3/4 inch arms, I think he's easily a top 3 player for pretty much everyone that covers the draft, right? Crazy strength. We just mentioned David Bailey's bend. I think Rueben Bain has significantly better bend than David Bailey.
Yes.
And he looks like he's 40 pounds heavier. And his lower half is strong as an ox. Like this guy could play 3-tech, no problem in the NFL. You'd have to put on maybe 5 to 10 pounds. But the fact that you can do that and rush off the edge, and he's absolutely just eating tackles for lunch all across his tape. And this one number that everyone's fixated on is his arm length. And the thing with edge rushers versus tackles for arm length is that especially in the pass rush, you can choose which move you utilize against a tackle. So there are certain moves that are more prone to winning in the arm length game. Long arm, obviously. Rueben Bain is probably not going to want to use a long arm against a tackle who has 35-inch arms. But there are other tools available, and this is what I talked about as my argument against Cashius Howell, is that Rueben Bain's toolkit is so deep, he can use the tackle's length against him. A lot of times when he's squaring up against a tackle who, obviously probably has longer arms than him, right? He's able to ever so slightly move where he hits that tackle initially, and that gets their arm in slightly disadvantaged position. And once you have that arm length neutralized, so to speak, Rueben Bain can just have his way with the tackle across from him. So he just has to create the slightest of edge, and then he can do whatever he wants. And he uses his arms as levers by getting in close to guys a lot. And we see NFL pass rushers do this all the time, like Trey Hendrickson, Aiden Hutchinson. I think both guys have sub 32.5-inch arms. They're probably right around there. So like that's within Rueben Bain's variance of arm length, apparently. But I don't really see what the knock is for him. In the run game, I do think the arm length hurts him a little more. Like his ability to, kind of get off blocks once guys, get him downhill, probably not the best. But if that's the only knock against you, like I'm completely fine with everyone, taking lesser players above him, taking David Bailey, in my mind, Arvell Reese above him, and then he falls to the Saints and goes to a better team. So I got really no gripes with them.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'll say what every guy wants to hear. Size does not matter if you know what you're doing with what you have. And Rueben Bain Jr. knows what he's doing. All right. If we go to a guy like Cashius Howell, at times he doesn't know what he's doing. It's kind of just flopping around. I'm kidding. He's not flopping around. But anyways, I went too deep into the metaphor there. But anyways, Rueben Bain Jr. is incredible, and I would be so extremely happy if he landed on the Saints at number 8. He's extremely high motor player. I talked about that being very important for some of my other guys. I think he is one of the highest motor players in this class, if not the highest motor, especially with his size, right? 6'2". He's not a huge, lanky guy, and he's still making plays all over the field. Strong and big enough to hold his ground in the run game. Guys might get their arms on him, but he does a relatively good job at neutralizing the amount of ground he gives up and stays in his spot. Diverse pass rush arsenal, explosive off the line. And I think for his arm length, STERB, like you said, he does a decent job of neutralizing the situation when he does get grabbed onto by guys with longer arms. So I think Rueben Bain, he has it all. Yes, his arms aren't the longest, but it doesn't matter. He knows what he's doing with them, and he will get the job done, if you know what I'm saying. But anyways, Ty, what are your thoughts on Rueben Bain Jr.?
Yeah, I'll add this. Apparently at the combine, Rueben Bain said that none of the scouts asked him about his arm length. It was only about production, right? So, it sounds like scouts are not as concerned with it. It's more just the media scouts, right, that are like, oh my God, 30-inch arms, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, you guys kind of covered it all, but it's like top to bottom, this guy doesn't really have any flaws. I'll push back a little bit, Sturb, on the 3-tech thing. I think that sometimes on the inside moves, you can see that he has a little bit of trouble because of the shorter arms. He can get locked up. So I think if you put him at the 3-tech, you kind of need to have longer arms on the inside. You need to create a ton of separation, as a 3-tech, as a defensive tackle. So I think he might struggle a little bit more there, but I see it because of the power, right? And he's got a really good move set. On the run game, if he's on the backside, he's surfing down really well, making plays. If he's on the front side, right, Jenks, like you said, I think he holds the line really well. The arms aren't a problem because he has so much power. He resets the line of scrimmage. In the pass game, he's got great pad level. The ghost rushes that he had against Notre Dame, I mean, those got me going. Like that is some of the best bend I've ever seen out of a prospect, and it makes so much sense. He's training every day with a Hall of Fame edge rusher and Jason Taylor.
He's like 265.
Yeah,
he's a big dude.
It's absurd the level of athleticism that he plays with as such a compact player. He's got great hand fighting. His clubs are awesome. His double swipes are awesome. I mean, this is almost as complete of a prospect as you can get at this level. I think the Jets would be stupid to pass on him, especially because they've had Jason Taylor in that building before. They can give Jason Taylor a call up and say, Jason, are the arms a problem? And he's going to say, hell no, this is the best player in this draft outside of maybe Caleb Downs. But the Jets are in a position where they need to take an edge rusher to change this defense. It doesn't get better than Rueben Bain. If you take Reese, I understand because of the upside. If you take David Bailey, I don't understand it. You're that scared of the arms. If you just turn on the tape, right, unless Woody Johnson's son is telling him that David Bailey had a higher overall in college football 26, then
which is reasonable.
Maybe then. But this guy, he was elite. And listen, when you see him play at such an elite level against so many elite teams all season long, Notre Dame typically has great offensive linemen. Ohio State has great offensive linemen, right? The tape doesn't lie. The tape does not lie, and he is an amazing player. He's number one by far on our list, and he should be the number 2 player picked in this NFL draft.
Yeah, let me say this. If the Saints somehow pick him at number 8, is there a shot that Tyler Shuck can lead the Saints on a Jaden Daniels type run in his second year? Is it possible?
They can make the playoffs. I'm not going to say that they're going to make the NFC Championship.
I think
we're winning the division for sure if we get Bain.
I think they would easily be NFC South favorites. I will say that. I do think that the Panthers added.
We won't be favorites.
I think they should be.
We're like plus
Panthers defense. That Panthers defense has the opportunity to be a top 5 to 10 unit.
I could see that. But I think they're off. I don't know. I think Bryce Young extremely limits them, but I will say I think Rueben Bain should be the first defensive end off the board in this draft class, and I think it's insane that it's not a consensus thing that he is going to be that guy. And I think, Ty, like you said, I think the Jets realistically should take him and probably will. Like, I mean, I think it's very realistic that they take him or Reese, with a little bit more of a versatility there for Reese, but I do think that Rueben Bain is definitely the number 1 defensive guy that should be taken in this draft class. Sturb, do you have any closing thoughts on Bain?
No, not on Bain. I think we just back
up it. Any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts in general?
Yeah, I will say like there were a ton of guys that we probably just didn't get to, like LT Overton, Romello Height, Gabe Akis, Derek Moore, Denai Dennis Sutton. Like, if you got questions about them, comment them. We'll watch them. We'll let you know our thoughts. But there's just so many guys.
Nadami Tucker's another guy that I really wanted to get to. I hadn't
never heard of him.
He's a very, very small school. I want to say it's like Western Michigan, maybe. Much smaller school, lesser conference. Yeah, lesser conference, but apparently he's a guy to look out for. But I haven't watched any of them yet. So gotta get to him. Ty, anything you got to say to the audience out there?
Nah, I got a man crush on Rueben Bain's on his Ghost Rush. That's about it.
That's teach tape for you, Ty. You got to start just clipping that and just showing it to your.
I had been. I sent them when we did the interior defensive line. I sent them some Lee Hunter. Just playing with that attitude. I sent them someone else. I send the young pups. I'm a D-line coach in high school, so I send the young pups some of this film and say, try to replicate this.
You coach them up a little bit. I love to see it. Teaching the youth of America. That's what Ty's bringing to the table. I'm out here studying for a CPA, bringing no value, and Ty is teaching up the young football players in the country. So good for you, Ty. But anyways, that'll do it for our Edge episode here in the NFL draft. Next week we might, I think it's running backs next week. I'll confirm that. But it's an interesting class. It's not necessarily the most talented class, but it's still going to be a fun class to break down. And then I'm going to try to reach out to you guys. We'll figure out a free agency reactions episode and break down some of the new landing spots, especially the Trey Hendrickson deal with the Ravens, and obviously the Max Crosby trade falling through to that same team, and how the Raiders reacted and how the rest of the NFL is reacting as well. So we'll see you guys next time. You guys know where to check us out on social media at Jenks Island and wherever you get your podcasts at Jenks Island as well. We'll see you guys next week.